What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time happy to bring you some new information about Fable, the upcoming reboot to, of course, the Fable series that got a whole bunch of information recently. Stuff I was pretty excited to talk about. In fact, I was pretty happy when we got the initial bit of news following a trailer and everything at the Xbox Game Showcase showing off the release date, the inclusion of Jack of Blades, and a couple of other characters central to the story they're telling here. But it just so happens that yesterday, from the time of this video, they dropped a big gameplay deep dive that they are calling a gameplay demo, where we could both see the game in motion and also a whole bunch of the systems and mechanics at work and in motion. So first up, let's talk about the basics. If you missed the initial trailer somehow, Fable is releasing on February 23rd, 2027, which, like a lot of games, is admittedly probably trying to get out of the way of GTA 6, as this game was initially supposed to release this year actually, and because of that and the nature of the delay, I do get the impression that this game is likely, for the most part, done, and they're just going to spend the extra time polishing. At least that would be my assumption anyway. Now, we also got the confirmation of the return of Jack of Blades. With this being a bit of a reboot to the series, they've got plenty of room to work there in terms of his actual inclusion, but Jack of Blades is like a sort of interdimensional being, more so than an actual person, so tons to go off of. And then the trailer also showed off what appears to be an antagonist of Isabel, the hero of Wraithmarsh. Now, before we get into the gameplay demo, it's probably worth a mention that they are shooting for the $70 price tag for this game, and so I certainly do think it needs to wow people. And the good news is, I suppose, that from what they've shown here in terms of systems and social elements of the game, it looks pretty promising. They did show off a little bit of combat as well towards the end of the presentation, if you will, but the focus was really on the other aspects. So let's break down what we saw here. So this demo took place in, I believe it's Oakshire, which is one of the game's different biomes. This one is kind of your stock standard farmlands and meadows types of places, but they go on to explain that each of these areas is going to be filled with all sorts of settlements with varying sizes, with the one they are focusing on here being named Silverbrook. Now, each of these towns has a theme and different citizens that get up to their own shenanigans all the time. Now, your reputation in the game, which is replacing the morality system, or at least attempting to be a more nuanced take on morality at least, rather, is unique to each town that you find yourself in. So it looks like everything in terms of justice and how you interact with these characters should be more or less confined to each individual town. But where we won't be getting the sort of morality transformations of the original series, the reboot is trying to focus on providing a morality system that shows off a bit of nuance in the way it is interpreted by the characters you interact with. Now, they describe these villagers as all having schedules, relationships with each other, and just different aspects that you can interact with that is working off of real-time dynamic systems that the game will remember. And all of that sort of contributes to your character's reputation in this town. Now, before I get into the specifics, I do want to call out something they mentioned later in the demo, which is that there will be a town crier in these towns that you can pay a lot of money to help with your reputation and change it sort of like medieval PR style if things go especially sideways. But then they go on to just give a bunch of examples and the way that you can interact with towns and how your actions there will then contribute to a reputation that individual citizens, based on their own characteristics, will interpret and feel about your character one way or another. They show this off with a talking pig quest at first. A kid wants to save this pig that talks, a butcher wants to butcher it for an upcoming feast, and you can step in and save it. One of the ways you can do that is by paying an exorbitant sum of money for it. And this gives you a reputation of being shrewd and having a lot of money, especially when they start spending it on things like buying up property, like a house or a pub. And they wanted to emphasize that these reputations, while, are certainly going to have good or bad connotations, like later on they show that you can be known for being a criminal or a killer. It's really more about how individual NPCs interpret those reputations of yours. So when you are rich, some people will enjoy that. Other people, like the tailor in this town, aren't a big fan. And their traits and everything that they have will then contribute to how your reputation makes them feel about you. So one shopkeeper might think that you're savvy, whereas another might think you are out of touch. And that then decides how that character interacts with you a whole bunch. Now, they went on to showcase this in a few more interactions. Like, for instance, you first encounter a beggar in town. You can give him a bunch of money, which he appreciates. But then when they go and buy that pub a little bit later, it's possible to not only buy it, but then manage elements of its day-to-day function, like hiring workers to staff the place so you're actually making money. And they hire that beggar that they had been giving money earlier, who's then thankful to you for the job. And that gives us a bunch of information. For instance, we're going to be able to buy up all of the property in the sort of side real estate game that was present in every Fable. And then there are also extra elements to managing those properties. When you buy a house, for instance, you can evict the tenants if you want to live in that house yourself, but this will give you the reputation for being heartless, so you might choose to pay them to leave instead in what is apparently a cash for keys situation in a video game. But seeing how they also show our protagonist here doing a job for a short while in order to afford that house, we are clearly living in the realm of fantasy. Another way they showed off these systems was actually getting into the romance bits. So Fable had romance systems, of course. You could get married and have children, and that kind of thing is present here, albeit with a few extra steps. So when you find a character that enjoys your reputation around that particular town, you can then choose to flirt with them, and then it'll bring up a list of what that character is attracted to, and if you meet those qualifications, so to speak, you can then take them out on a date, which seems to have a chance of going well if you meet all the requirements and do the right things, that kind of stuff. And once that's done, you can potentially lean into continuing that relationship and then later getting married if things go well. And depending on how you treat that relationship, they might leave you, you could break up with them, and of course engage in the darker side of morality by being a no-good dirty cheater, or by murdering the guards, take your pick. Other systems they showed off were, for instance, going to one of the tailors in order to buy up a bunch of different clothes. They mentioned that there is going to be a wardrobe where you can actually customize everything about your character, not just clothes, but actual character appearance stuff, though here they just showed the menu for like buying clothes. So it's hard to say what character creation is actually going to be, but they also pointed out that the prices of the shop they were at were affected by the reputation that you had with that particular shopkeep and how they sort of reacted to thinking you are out of touch for being rich and an entrepreneur. They also mentioned that there's about 120 shops across the entirety of the game, each with their own inventory and salespeople, that kind of stuff. And that's interesting information because it means that I am ultimately going to own 120 shops in Fable. Weird. And then last but not least, they showed off a bit of the justice system and combat system, kind of all in one go. So one of the many ways your actions can affect your reputation is by committing crimes or just kind of acting reckless in town. For instance, pulling out your bow and shooting arrows off in town can give you a reckless endangerment charge. You take it too far and start actively assaulting people, guards will come after you. You can start killing them if you want, though they will spawn endlessly. And you're going to get a reputation for being a criminal and a lawbreaker, and this also racks up a bounty. Now, you will eventually have to pay that bounty off, but you'll have to pay off less of it based off of how long you've been away from the town, apparently. And while you can pay the bounty off, the reputation sticks around, presumably unless you go through the hassle of changing it properly via the town crier. But NPCs will remember all of these different actions. Now, combat was very limited, so I don't have too much to say on it. It was really just them attacking some guards and stuff. It looks to be the typical combination of might, magic, and skill in this particular game, so that's kind of a hallmark of the Fable series. You take those and weave them into combat styles. Here we see a bunch of different abilities, magic, ranged power-ups via the melee attacks, that kind of thing, and combinations therein. And they mention that they're going for a sort of free-form approach where you can freely mix all of that stuff to play the game the way you want it. But I imagine there will be a combat deep dive at some point in the future where you can go a little more in-depth on that. But for today, I would say that is really the most important stuff to know from everything they have shown. I thought this was great after so long of not getting any real information about it. It's been awesome to hear about all this, and I'm excited to learn more. I'm very pumped for this game. I think it'll be one of the big ones of next year, one way or another. And while there are still plenty of things we don't know, like for instance the story and all that, everything I've seen thus far is looking good and has me excited to play this when the time rolls around. But for today, that is pretty much going to do it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.